I want people to learn why the Federal Reserve is a horrible thing and why we should abolish the Fed and go back to a gold standard and how it affects our monetary policy. I want people to learn more about why the government shouldn't be the one you look to save you, ever, for anything. What individual rights are, why why entitlement programs are horrible for a society.
Welcome to this episode of the Sharpening Report. I'm your host, Sam Johnson. We're up on YouTube, iTunes, Blog Talk, and you can follow my Twitter, Sam T. Johnston. Well, everyone's still arguing about everything. Whether it comes to the mainstream media, talking about whatever topic is the hot topic of the day, they're still arguing. And lately it's been General Flynn, and what has actually been going on there is really interesting. And we are joined by someone who does some fantastic research and investigation, Tracy Beanz. She has her own YouTube channel, and she is just a wonderful person in general. So Tracy, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm great.
Tracy, I know we talked a little bit before how the whole General Flynn situation is kind of getting on our nerves a little bit. So before we get into the most recent events, can you give us a little bit of background for people maybe who aren't keeping up to date on what's going on with Flynn? Just give us a background on what's happening.
Okay, so General Flynn was the incoming national security advisor for President Trump. Barack Obama lobbed some sanctions on Russia right before he left office. During the transition, General Flynn called Ambassador Kislyak from Russia to talk to him about the sanctions and basically said, hold off, don't go crazy and do anything rash. We're probably going to walk this back in a couple days. They were listening in on the conversation because Kislyak is a foreigner. They illegally unmasked him. Sally Yates illegally unmasked General Flynn in that conversation. General Flynn, when he had that call, was actually in the Dominican Republic on vacation. They unmasked General Flynn. They leaked to the media that the call happened. General Flynn knew that because he read the reports. And then we found out that the Andrew McCabe, well, let me go back to one little detail. It's a very complicated story, you see. So apparently Flynn told Vice President Pence that he didn't talk about the sanctions with Kislyak, but he actually did talk about them. And then then Pence went out on the media saying he didn't talk about the sanctions. I don't know what you're saying. And then it turned out that he actually did talk about the sanctions, so President Trump let him go because he lied to Pence. That's the only reason why he was let go, not for any other reason. Then we found out that in that transition period between the time he spoke to Kislyak and when he was let go, the FBI questioned him about the conversation. They had the transcript. They knew what he said. Andrew McCabe apparently called General Flynn, or General Flynn called McCabe, which depending on what paperwork you read, and said, we'd like to send some folks down there to talk to you. We don't really think you need a lawyer. If you bring a lawyer in, it's just the DOJ is going to have to get involved and it's going to be a big, nightmare. So just conversation. Fine. They go down and talk to him. They decide they're not going to tell him he has a right to an attorney. They're not going to tell him that he's being questioned in an investigation. He talks to them, forgets some pieces of the conversation that he had, and mentions to McCabe, he knows he has the transcript of the conversation. So knowing someone has a transcript of your conversation, are you going to then lie about the conversation knowingly? Reading in the media that you've already been cleared of any wrongdoing and that, everybody in the world knows that you've called this ambassador. You're going to lie about that willingly? No. Probably not. Anyway, so long story short, when the special counsel gets appointed after the nonsense jerk tyrant of the year, Comey, gets fired. I'm a little bit frustrated today. Can't take it anymore. Anyway, once he gets fired, is this too long? Am I going too long on this?
Keep going.
Okay. So once he gets fired, he has his memos and Andrew McCabe has his memos. The special counsel is appointed. The special counsel goes after Flynn, and he takes a plea deal. And he takes a plea to lying to investigators. And there's also some FARA violation sort of things in there at the very end of the plea that he was working on behalf of the government of Turkey. And that's in his plea agreement as well. And from the day I read that, I said, there's something weird going on here with Turkey. So fast forward, there's the big hubbub about the 302s, whether they were even written, whether they lied. Comey testifies Flynn didn't lie. Why is he pleading to lying? They get all the way through this after postponement, after postponement, after postponement. They put out their sentencing guidelines and they say, we'd like for Flynn to get no jail time because he was such a huge cooperating witness in all these other cases, with both the DOJ and the special counsel. And they say, we don't recommend any jail time for him. And then he responds to the memo and he says, oh, by the way, in the 302s, they say, don't talk to General Flynn about don't tell him he needs an attorney. They just treated him differently than they treated Papadopoulos or Manafort. So he puts that out there. Then the judge says, hold on a second. This judge is known for prosecuting, for going after prosecutorial corruption. He says, hold on a second. I want to see everything. I want to see all the exculpatory evidence and the 302s because of what Mike Flynn said. We get that from Mueller. We get the February 302s from the Strzok-Patenka duo that interviewed him. We get the August 302s from the people that interviewed Strzok about that interview, if that makes sense. It's a little complicated. This is crazy. It's a crazy story. I feel like I'm living in a spy novel, for God's sake. Really? Anyway, so then finally we get to today. And the judge says, do you want to back off from this plea that you took? It looks to me pretty shady. It looks to me like you didn't lie. I'm not going to let you plead guilty to a crime that you didn't commit. Now, Flynn says, no, I did it. I'm guilty. He goes, do you want an investigation into what happened here? Nope. Are you sure you want to plead guilty? Yep, I'm good. I lied. I take full responsibility for it. I know how serious it is. And everybody's like, you just had an out, dude. You just had an out, to get out of all this. Not when yesterday the Department of Justice releases an indictment of Flynn's business partner for massive FARA violations, trying to get the public sentiment in the United States to change on Gulen so that they could extradite him back to Turkey. Now, all of this was going on in Flynn's company, and he was emailed about it, but not in such a way that he was involved. But he's in the emails inside of the indictments. And it appears as though these guys just kind of ran off and did their own thing on the side. But I think that the special counsel has Flynn on some Turkey stuff. And so if he doesn't take the plea and that gets thrown out, then they can come back and charge him with the Turkey stuff after he's already cooperated with all of this stuff, all these investigations, including the one that indicted his two business partners. So I think that the safe bet for Flynn is to take this plea deal. But now that the judge has been like, yo, I'm not going to be, this is a horrible thing that you've done lying to investigators. I'm going to throw the book at you. They want to wait until after he's done cooperating to determine his sentence. And that's basically the Flynn story in a nutshell.
Yeah, man, you summarized 2.5 years in 5 minutes. So that's really impressive. But it seems like the narrative from the conservative side, at least, has been Flynn is a really great guy and he's just been totally thrown under the bus. But maybe that's not necessarily what you're saying. Well,
not necessarily. I mean, yes and no. Okay. The extent of what he actually did in regards to Turkey looks very minimal. But you know how it is with the special counsel. It doesn't matter how minimal it looks. They're going to get you, and they're going to get you good. So instead of getting him, they got a bunch of other people and whatever else he did that we still don't know about. Flynn is a good guy. He is. And, he has a big axe to grind with the Obama administration. They did not want him to be in the Trump admin at all. They wanted him out. And they conspired to get him. If somebody looked at me and scrutinized my life and recorded every single one of my phone calls for 3 or 4 years, I'm sure they'd find something to bring me up on charges on, pulling a matrix tag off or doing something. Who knows? I could jaywalk 70 times and be a felon. Who knows? So it's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah. So, so let's talk about big picture. Why are they going after Flynn? Is it just because they hate, because he's connected to Trump, just because he did some things to Obama? Or is there a bigger attack on maybe an American freedom that they're trying to attack? So what's the big picture here? Why go after Flynn?
I think they're going after everybody that had any dirt on anyone else. So in an unleashed administration like the Trump administration would be in terms of, whose dirty laundry is being aired, they're trying to keep his leverage silent. So they're going after the people that have leverage over anyone who's a bad guy. And I think that's why they picked who they picked.
Interesting. You said something when you were going through the beginning part of you feel like you're in a novel and you're in a story, and I've heard a lot of people say similar things, and a lot of people are just getting tired of it. It's like never ending. It's constantly going. Is that something that you run across a lot? And what do we do about that fatigue? I think that's maybe part of the intention behind it all, is to get people tired of looking at this kind of stuff.
No, I agree with you on that 100%. I think that it's easy to get fatigued when you're never seeing any justice for the real actual criminals. It goes on and on and on, and the only people going down are the good guys. When does it end? It's today I'm very fatigued. And, for me, I usually keep my head up because I see the kind of the ground game and the battle. But it was a bad day today. Today being, I don't know when you're airing this, but today's the 18th. So for me anyway, enough. It's impossible, because how many times do you see a two-tiered justice system, and how many times can people say, okay, in a month, okay, when they release the Heiser report, okay, when, you know what I mean? It's utterly frustrating.
So do we need more exposure on things, or what do you think that we can do about a system that doesn't seem to be functioning the way it is now? You focus a lot on your channel about facts and relaying facts, so I am diving into the opinion world now. What can we do about such a tough system that doesn't allow us to prosecute people who have done things wrong?
I'm going to say that we're getting close to having to go on eBay and buy yellow reflective vests. Really. I mean, there's nothing else working at this point. They're stealing elections. We're in a banana republic. People have to stop being pacified and apathetic, is my opinion, and get up off their asses and do something about this. Really, it's at, there's only for so long that you can just kind of say, oh, nothing's going to happen. Yeah, nothing's going to happen if you don't take it into your own hand. I mean, this is our country, for God's sakes.
Yeah, and a lot of people saw the Trump election as being something that's going to start to shine a light on these things, and there's been a lot of light shined on corruption, but it doesn't seem to be moving the big players into prison. And it's like people are just starting to get fatigued about it. They're like, man, what is happening? You can even see the Trump base starting to shift away a little bit, and it's just it seems like it's too much.
What's the alternative, though? Really, if we don't stick by him, what's the alternative going to be for us?
I don't know. But do you want to stick by someone who's maybe just playing a part to keep the corruption going?
I don't think that's the case at all. No, I don't think he's playing a part. I think he's, it's been 2 years. And if you think about everything that has been accomplished in 2 years outside of putting people in jail, we're in a pretty good spot. If they didn't if the establishment and the power structure wasn't going after him so badly, if the propaganda wasn't streamed at us 24/7 on the mainstream media, if social media companies weren't censoring us for our views, if they weren't pushing up negative comments to the top of his tweets or anyone's tweets, it's all psychological conditioning, and we have to break through it. But the alternative to 2020 presidency, no one's going to win a primary against him. So it's going to be him versus some crazy lunatic leftist Democrat. I think I can hedge my bets on President Trump.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Do you think that maybe it's these first terms, I'll get a lot of things set up, and then a second term, now that I don't have to lose anything, I can actually go after everyone?
I think that we're going to start to see that happening now in a way, because if you notice, there's a cleaning out in that administration. Kelly's gone. We've gotten rid of Sessions. There's staff changing around, and people are moving, and, ambassadors are changing. And it's almost like he's free all of a sudden to put the people he wants in the places that he wants. That's what it seems like to me. So I don't know.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned the mainstream media, and you just gave a speech at the American Priority Conference about Operation Mockingbird, and talking a lot about the mainstream media. Can you give us some background on what that is?
Operation Mockingbird was in the early 50s, where the CIA basically went to schools, to the media, and started using them as agents and like funneling information and infiltrating into the media to get the messages that they wanted out to the people. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse from there. And it was uncovered, actually, and it was in front of Congress, and they said, we'll never do that again. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but it's still happening today, obviously. I mean, you've heard about, what's his name? Who's the guy that interviewed Stormy Daniels? Anderson Cooper. He was FBI. I mean, CIA. Brzezinski, the daughter. Think about her connections to her late father. You know, it's still happening. What better way to control people than to feed them the information you want them to hear to go along with your narrative? So Operation Mockingbird was, in the beginning of my speech, how I kind of just tried to explain how important independent media is. Because there's huge forces against us. And so independence, not on the mainstream, not hired by corporations, allow us to be basically accountable to the people instead of to the pharmaceutical companies or to Monsanto or to politicians or to the government or anything like that.
Because I agree, obviously the mainstream media is important on getting information out, but as we still see not as much justice as we just talked about coming to the people that deserve it, is the alternative media functioning enough? Like, are we doing what we're supposed to, or is there a next gear that we need to kick it into to try to motivate more people?
I think that it's an interesting kind of arena because there's so many different facets to it. Like, there's what I do, which is open source. And then there's like, you know, a flurry of information that's not even sourced or backed up or anything that you could consider like, you know, maybe it's true, but maybe it's not true. And people get lost in that. And, you know, then there's people who have like a false hope that, you know, because so like people come out all the time and say an anonymous source told me that, you know, there are troops outside of Clinton's house, whatever. And the people believe it. So I guess we're in a very malleable state right now, and it doesn't help that we're being deplatformed left and right. So I'm sure we could do a better job. We always can. We always can do a better job. We have to stop eating each other. If we can do that, it would be great.
What do you mean by that?
Like the infighting and the, you know, you're not this and it's just horrible. It's horrible. I used to say it's because there's no groupthink on the right, really. People are very individualized. And so there's no, like, you know, you see the left, they don't publicly fight one another ever. Yeah. They're very unified. That does not happen on our side of the aisle, or my side of the aisle anyway. It never happens. So the infighting just makes it hard to get anything accomplished.
Yeah, it's like people feed on drama, and then more people follow someone because they're involved with drama, and then that's what sells, and then they forget the facts and the important things, and people just, it's like watching a TV show, like, or getting caught in a novel, like you said, you know, people just love that drama, and it doesn't seem helpful at all. And I just feel like, I don't know, what can we do about that besides just, I mean, you're only accountable for yourself, I guess, but if there's like, I don't know, it seems like such a hopeless effort to just watch people who have millions of followers just argue with each other.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that really got me was there's like these little wings of the conservative movement, right? They're like little cliques, and everybody knows what they are. And when Laura Loomer chained herself to Twitter headquarters, I was thoroughly impressed, I have to say. I really was. And I don't agree with a lot of what she says and does. I really don't. I had the privilege of meeting her when I was at the American Priority Conference. She's wonderful. I don't have to agree with her all the time for her to be wonderful. You know what I mean? But this particular time, Kyle Kashiv said, this makes us all look bad. I'm like, to who? Who does it make us look bad to? The mainstream media? The pundits? Like, when are we going to stop giving a crap who we look bad in front of? Like, that gives them so much power that we care what they think. I think that's, enough already. And I got into a little bit of a back and forth with them about it because I used that quote on my wall. I don't know if you can see what it says. It says, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." And, closeting people and making them out to be some embarrassment because they take a stand for something important to them, I think is antithetical to everything we're trying to accomplish. I'm not trying to freaking impress anybody.
Well, yeah, but on the one hand, you still have to, you still want people to, like the medium that you put forth and the way people hear what you're saying is still important, is it not? Like, if you go and do crazy things, like run around with, I don't know, like just screaming nonsense, it's not going to be very helpful. So you should still care a little bit about people, what you think. I guess this is just something that I struggle with a little bit.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I just feel like, obviously she wasn't being completely irresponsible. She was making a very good point, and she was #1 trending on Twitter after they deplatformed her. How perfect of a stunt was that? I mean, it proved a hell of a point. Obviously, I don't think people should go like doing crazy things like running around. As a matter of fact, just for an example, when I took issue with her was when she tweeted out her inflammatory tweets about not being able to get a non-Muslim cab driver or Uber driver. I was like, that's disgusting. I thought it was gross. And I distanced myself from it and said, if you're going to be a leader and people are going to look to you as a leader, you have to be more cognizant of the fact that you represent those people. I understand. I don't think that particular situation was a situation where we should be worrying about how crazy we look. I kind of thought it was worth the attention, in my opinion.
Yeah. So one thing that how do I phrase this properly is, we talk a lot about, what you said was the left is kind of more unified, at least out in public, and they don't have any infighting. And they're right. Their morals are based on individualism, and that's what. And so they don't follow groups and stuff like that. And so it leads to fighting. But, at the same time, we still have this like, oh, we're Republican or we're conservative. Do you think that maybe it's time for like just the right to just break off from that mentality as a whole and sink its teeth into the individualism so we're not labeled by, what group we might be a part of? Is that possible even? The only reason why I don't think it's possible is because the left still contains the power structure. Not even just the left, the right too. They still maintain the power structure that puts the label out there. So like they would call like a Thomas Wichter alt-right. And he's like, that's ridiculous, but it doesn't matter. All they need to do is say it, and it is, and it's so. I don't think that we can do anything to stop that, like just by proclaiming I'm not this, or this. And the value system will remain either way. But if we could only all just be wonderful individuals, right? Where I was going to go with my comment before that I didn't finish was that I used to think it was that there wasn't groupthink. And I think that that's wrong. I think there's a massive amount of groupthink. And, it's basically like, if you don't believe the way I believe, then you're a shill, or you're bad, or you're evil, or you're not really for MAGA, or you don't really support Trump, or you're being sent here by some other, just because of a disagreement. And then the mob comes. So we have a long way to go. I mean, we're in our baby steps, I think, as this new movement goes, and people need to learn a lot more. So, well, what do you think the next step would be?
I really don't know where we go, like, unless there is justice, unless there is, that's what we're all focused on right now. I think that we may have to throw caution to the wind and just execute a plan that's very loosely put together to try to affect the change we want, and very organic and kind of unorganized to affect the change that we want before we can then circle back around and actually figure out a plan. And that's way above my pay grade. But I mean, I know what I would want to see, but how to get all that accomplished. And
well, can we dive into what you'd want to see? I think that sounds really interesting. I mean, to a lot of people, you are on the front lines. I mean, you're the one always searching information. You're neck deep in all sorts of different types of research and have your hands on, primary sources that you do a great job of understanding and spreading that message and making it easier for people to understand. So I know a lot of people would really value a what do you want to see happen? And then, just maybe by that, they can start to, in their own day-to-day lives, kind of at least push their own local area into that direction.
I'm glad you said that. Well, thank you for all those kind words. I have to apologize for my language tonight. It's not as clean as I normally am, so I apologize. I think I want to see people start to learn more about liberty. And locally is where you start that. I want people to learn why the Federal Reserve is a horrible thing and why we should abolish the Fed and go back to a gold standard and how it affects our monetary policy. I want people to learn more about why the government shouldn't be the one you look to save you ever for anything, what individual rights are, why why entitlement programs are horrible for a society. I need people to, like, in my head, I would like to see people move more towards individual liberty and less, even more away from like the huge populist sort of a movement that's coming in, more towards like a libertarian sort of but real libertarian, not the crazy co-opted libertarian that we're seeing now. Just understanding why things would always be better if the markets took care of them and how the market works and, how groupthink works and how mob mentality works and what the non-aggression principle is and, all of that stuff I would like to see more of. And I think we would go a long way towards fixing the government that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start with the Federal Reserve. I definitely agree with you there. I definitely see there's a lot of issues and it's extremely dangerous. And the way that the Federal Reserve came into power is extremely not good. We'll just put it that way. So let's dive into that topic a little bit to at least get the ball rolling in some people's minds on why it's not what we should be supporting.
Well, they're basically creating money out of thin air. They're not accountable to anyone. They're not a branch of the United States government. They basically wield the magic wand over our economy. They increase and decrease inflation, not so much decrease. They increase and decrease interest rates. Trump has been out complaining about the Federal Reserve for a long time now, over the past couple weeks, several times. They basically pump and dump. They'll pump the market full of cash and they'll quantitative easing and it's a fake, useless, paper-based economy that has zero value and operates completely off of debt. It's basically a debt-based financial system, and the Federal Reserve kind of is at the helm of all of that. It's why the dollar has decreased in value. Obviously, basic economics, you flood the market with something, it decreases in value. It's just the way markets work, no matter what anybody tells you. It's basically an illegal entity that we are enslaved to as a country, and it needs to go, or at the very least be audited, so that we know what they're doing with that money that let's say they bailed out the banks for $2 billion. Where the hell did they get that money from? We need to see that stuff.
Yeah. A great resource for that is, I think it's called the book. Is it The Creature from Jekyll Island? Is that what it's called? That is an excellent book that really outlines what happened, how it was created, and what some of its powers are. It's fantastic. I definitely urge people to read that.
G. Edward Griffin. And he spoke at a conference that I helped organize on Long Island several years ago, and I bought him lunch, and I'll never forget it.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that like? Great. I bet you he was super awesome to listen to.
He's so awesome. Brilliant. That's not the only book he's written either. He's written several books, and that one is just the most well-known, and it's worth every last sentence. It's really amazing. Good book.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing that you talked about was the government shouldn't protect you and entitlement programs. Now, to me, this one is pretty obvious on why you wouldn't want this, but what dangers do you see with those type of things?
Mươi where do I begin? So I'm just thinking like out loud about the Patriot Act, the NDAA, even the Defense Authorization Act. Gosh, all of these things and entitlements, they're two separate topics. So we'll take entitlements first. Anytime that the government spends money that is not theirs, There's no value to it. They don't care. So like if you had to go out and buy a television and one store had it for $80 and the other store had it for $100 and somebody walked up to you and said, here's $200, buy a TV. And the store with the $100 television was right in front of you, but the $80 TV was like 3 blocks away. Where would you go to buy the television with someone else's money? Probably right in front of you to the $100 television, right?
Yeah.
The government there's no worth to the government to tax dollars whatsoever. It is a waste and abuse. Monstrosity is a good word. And, entitlements, all they do is further indebt the people to the government, welfare, food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, government-run healthcare, student loans even. We'll talk about that one because that one really is very interesting to me. Nobody really thinks about it like this, but the only reason why tuition prices in this country, they talk about free school, free tuition. The only reason why tuition is so high in this country is because the government is involved. And here's why. Grants and guaranteed loans. They'll guarantee a loan to an 18-year-old kid with no job and no promise to pay it back, no means to pay it back, no discernible income whatsoever. And the colleges know that the student is guaranteed the grant or the loan. They'll get it no matter what. It's the only loan on the face of the earth you can get with no collateral whatsoever. You don't put any money down. You don't have anything in terms of assets to back it up. You don't even know if you can ever pay it back. And they're like, here, take $200,000. Have fun. And that's the way it works. The government just loans money left and right. So of course colleges will raise their tuition prices. Why not? The more they raise the tuition prices, the more the government will dole out the money in grants and loans. So that's what has artificially caused a $70,000 tuition bill for some schools and $80,000 a year because the government's involved in education. Stop it. Just imagine what would happen if students weren't guaranteed hundreds of $1,000s in student loans. Nobody would be going to college. No one could afford it. Mm-hmm. What would happen? Tuition prices would
drop.
Pew. And then everybody could afford school. Wow. Isn't that amazing? Instead of giving everyone free college, give everyone affordable college and get the government out of it.
Yeah, that is such a great point. It's making people stuck and owing the government and making them stuck in their day jobs, making them, just in part miserable because they have all this debt hanging over them all the time. And it's just this effort to control people into and forcing them into working 40 hours a week until they die or until they can go into retirement on someone else's money. That's the whole
Social Security.
Social Security is also a nightmare. So
well, at least give us the ability to opt out of it if we want and save our own damn money instead of paying into it. They can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because we're paying for the people who are on it now. Mm-hmm. And, you'll make the argument if you're in your 50s and 60s, I paid into this my entire life. I deserve it. Fine. Let the babies coming out of the womb decide whether or not they want to pay into Social Security when they start working. And stop spending it on other things. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't trust the government with anything, ever.
Yeah. That's something that blows my mind is especially, because the socialist movement is really starting to really say everything the opposite of what we're saying today. And they hate Trump so much and they hate everything that he stands for, but they want to give the government more power. That just doesn't make any sense. It's like, okay, well, what happens when another Trump gets in and he has all the power all of a sudden? Like, that logically doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. They want to take away our guns, but they call him a tyrant. Well, how the hell are you going to get rid of him then? That's what the Second Amendment is for. People need to start understanding how our Constitution was written and why. The whole entire, it's all about power. They don't care about you. Authoritarians, communists, socialists, they don't care about you. They don't care about you and your family. They care about more power. That is all they care about. If you are completely dependent on the government, you are completely dependent on them forever. And especially in a system like you're seeing in Venezuela, people can't even buy food anymore. Capitalism is demonized so often, but it is a beautiful system when it's not abused. It really is.
Yeah. So going back to the entitlements just a little bit, what are some resources that you can think of off the top of your head for people to learn more about these programs and the philosophies behind them and the dangers behind them?
Well, one place that you can go is I believe it's Ron Paul's website, or the Heritage. Heritage has a lot of really good papers on it. The Ron Paul Institute is one where you can learn a lot of this stuff. He is brilliant, and he basically taught me. Well, he was the gateway for me to learn everything I know about liberty and how things work. You guys can go and check stuff out there. You'd probably start reading and never stop. It's addictive once you start. It really is, because freedom is addictive, and you become empowered when you start learning like why you should be responsible for yourself. And like I said before, like the non-aggression principle, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Do not ever hit somebody first unless you're attacked. Like it's just, if everybody just lived by the golden rule, just imagine how. And the government is inherently stealing from you. The government inherently is violating that on you every single day. Every time they take $1 from your paycheck in taxes, they're stealing from your pocket. Think about it. It's true. Taxation is theft.
Yeah. Another great resource for me that really opened my eyes to this. It's the Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand is my all-time favorite book. She has a lot of views on religion. I know a lot of people listen to the show are Christian. They have you have to understand the way that she talks about religion in that book to really appreciate it. But it talks all about individualism and why it's the way to go, why it's you have to, it's all about yourself and relying on yourself to move forward, because if you rely on someone else, then you are a slave to them in some sense. And so I would strongly urge everyone to read that. Think about the topics and the ideas that she's putting forth. I would say she's a radical on that front. Yeah. I wouldn't go as far as her on a lot of her ideas, but still the premises she puts forth are super, super fascinating. And you can read that book, and even Fountainhead, which is another one of her books, and it can be directly applied to what we're going through today. Absolutely fascinating. It's
also crazy how much closer we've gotten to 1984 over the past 2 years as well.
Yeah.
I was talking to my dad the other day, and I don't think that he realized the last speech by JFK about the secret societies and secrets in, government, and how he's going for transparency, because he mentioned something about, he's like, I forget what it was. Oh, how nothing's going to happen with the Clinton Foundation, and we're completely in 1984 now, and there's no rule of law. And I'm like, he mentioned something. He said, I think that outside of Trump, JFK was the last honest president. And I played that for him, and he's like, oh my God. Like he didn't realize it.
Yeah.
It's the past is it feels like it's repeating itself, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's it's funny how 1984 is thrown around by every single group of people, no matter what side they're on. It's just like, it's so odd to me. That's another, you just have to be aware of the way people use phrases. It's just interesting.
Well, it's because it's written like some of those people think that it's a utopia for real based on their viewpoint, right? So the crazy Marxist will think that that's beautiful and maybe be happy about it or read it from a different point of view. It's something.
Yeah. So another thing that you mentioned was the mob mentality and understanding that. So real quick, I think a lot of people probably know what it is, at least on the surface level. But what is the mob mentality, and how is it dangerous?
Well, it can be dangerous or it can be helpful, right? It can be helpful in that if somebody's the first one to stand up against an injustice or a tyrant or someone evil, then the mob mentality is kind of responsible for the next person standing up and the next person standing up and the next person standing up. So it could be used for good, but it's also bad, because if you see one person piling on someone and then you just pile on because they are, then the other person behind you will do the same thing. And after a few layers, nobody knows in that mob why they were attacking the person in the first place. And it just turns into a free-for-all, and nobody goes the extra mile to think about what's actually happening and kind of discover what caused it in the first place. So it's dangerous to just wildly follow something, blindly follow something without thinking it through for yourself. And then it's also dangerous to attack someone who thinks differently than you just because of that.
I think You said it, obviously it can be used for good, and it can be used for, progressing positive morals and things like that. But I think overall it's a weak play. I think even when it's used for good, it still has mostly followers involved, and those people, if they're just following, then they're not really invested, and they're not really going to stand up for what's right. And so I think it's a weak play by anyone who's trying to actually make a legitimate change, is to rely on the mob mentality. And I think that's where it goes back to collectivism versus individualism. Is I don't think it's a good thing, even if it does progress things in a positive direction. That shouldn't be our focus.
Because you don't have the people may not have the conviction that they need behind why they're doing what they're doing to keep it going.
Yeah, exactly.
Understood.
Yeah,
I'll give you that. Cool.
So maybe this conversation seems like it's kind of all over the place for people listening, but I think the purpose is we're looking at the mainstream media, and we're looking at the way our world is functioning, especially through this General Flynn controversy, and people getting worn out and just wanting change. And so we're talking about different ways to things that you need to understand, and different resources to better understand those things, so you can start to change yourself into becoming an individual and wanting to change the world around you, because that's what our focus is. So were there any other topics that we didn't get to touch on that are good for someone to really sink their teeth in?
I'm just thinking about, like, one of the biggest things, I think, a friend and I were talking about this the other day. The only other thing I'd add is that all of this, none of this starts on a federal level. This all starts in your backyard. Your school board, your local meetings, neighborhood watch, very small. You start very small, and then you work your way slowly outward. You don't start at the top and go down. So there's things you can do locally and get involved very locally in your town, in your county, and then in your state. But start small and change the culture in your local community first, and then branch it outward like tree roots.
Mm-hmm. So this is something that I struggle with personally. I'm involved with a group that I volunteer with. I do some work. I'm not going to get into it, but they have some policies that are politically correct. We'll say. They're just, you have to be. You can't talk about any religion. You can't talk about politics. You can't talk about anything of that sort of stuff, and they expect you to push certain ideas and be accepting of certain ideas at all levels. And so the problem comes across is, do I stand up against these ideas because I don't believe in them, and lose my ability to be involved with this group, and say they kick me out because I'm not standing up for if I'm not speaking out against these certain topics? Or do I speak out against these topics and get kicked out, and then lose that ability to talk to someone? What's your opinion on that? I mean, it's kind of a gray area, but the general idea is, what battle should we be taking here? Should we stand up against every single thing that we come across, or do we need to pick certain battles and play? Like, what? I don't know. It's a tough question. It's kind of an ambiguous question, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the way a sort of I'm going to say this and people are going to take it the wrong way, but in an anarchist society, ostracization is the way that the society polices itself. So in other words, if you were in a community and you decided you were going to be a serial killer, the community as a whole would likely get together and push you out and make sure that you're never back there again, and the serial killer would then be wandering around trying to find somewhere else to live, right? Eventually, all those people would end up somewhere together on like Hell Island someplace, right? The same thing I think can be said for organizations like what you're talking about. If you have a very intrinsic sort of aversion to something like that, it doesn't make you feel good inside. It's taking away from the joy of whatever volunteer work you'd be doing, because you're not pushing things that feel good to you. So if I were you in that situation, or anyone in that situation, I would probably self-deport and not be there anymore, just because it doesn't jive with what I feel. And you don't even necessarily need to say anything about it, but if you take a stand and leave, or maybe write like a letter saying why you're leaving, then maybe someone else will say, you know what, I've been meaning to say this for a long time too. And maybe they'll change. And if they don't change, they'll just draw people that believe that way to them and let them have their happy little group, and you can start your own.
Interesting. Do you think that just gives ground to bad ideas?
Well, there are no such things necessarily as bad ideas. It's just who agrees with them or not. Like, if we start saying, like, I don't want to enable this bad idea, then we're no better than the left trying to stop speech. I feel like you have a bad idea, by all means, as long as you're not killing someone, enjoy. It's going to be a bad idea, and hopefully you'll learn from it. I mean, everybody had a bad idea at least once that turned into something great.
Yeah, as long as you're not as long as you're not affecting someone else's freedoms, you can have as many ideas as you want. That's fair.
Yep.
I accept that. Well, we're coming actually to the end of this very different interview, I would say. It's kind of it's good though. It's good conversation. What is there anything that we didn't get to touch on that you find really important, or even maybe just some encouraging words for people that are also starting to get worn down by what's going on in our world?
Yeah, we need to hang in there. We have a long road ahead of us, and it doesn't end with us giving up in any scenario, literally. So brush off the fatigue, shake yourselves off. Don't look at any one person to lead you or any one person to be your savior. Just understand the values that you have and what you want this country to look like and fight for that instead.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. It's, it's putting on your armor of God every day. It's reading scripture. It's understanding the ideas that other people put forth and making the effort to understand even the people you don't agree with, understanding why they're saying what they're saying and being just true to yourself. And that's what's going to get us through this is being an individual. So Tracy, thank you so much for coming on the Sharpening Report. I really appreciate it.
This was great. Thank you for having me. Fun.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that's our show this week. Again, it's about being an individual. It's about changing your local communities. It is doing the research for yourself. I know it can be tiring. I know it can be exhaustive, but if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? And then if you don't do it, then you're just relying on someone else to give you information. Even if you love this show, even if you love the guests that I have on this show, but you're just listening to it and that's it, well, you're just relying on me and our guests to give you information, and you don't know for sure if it's accurate. It's up to you to find out what's accurate. It's up to you to search our reality and understand it and find the ultimate form of truth, because you don't want to rely on anyone, even the Sharpening Report. As fantastic of a show as this is, you don't want to rely on it. You want to rely on yourself. You want to rely on God. So read scripture, find out for yourself, and hope you enjoyed the show. I'm not going to ask you to like, subscribe, or share, but I appreciate it if you do. Hope you have a great week. All right, Tracy, do you have a favorite joke again?
Another joke?
Yeah, another joke.
I have so many of them. I told you the without a head joke. That one already went over.
Yeah.
Okay, I got one. It's holiday centric.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
What did Mrs. Claus say to Santa when she looked up in the sky?
What?
Looks like reindeer.
Oh, gosh. Oh, awesome.
It's better than decapitated heads.
That's true. A little more positive.